In 1983, two 13-year-old brothers vanished after soccer practice. No crash, no struggle, no goodbye, just two cleats left in the dirt beside a dry canal and the faint smell of hot pavement that faded by nightfall. For 40 years, there were no answers, no sightings, no trace of what became of them. But decades later, inside a sealed psychiatric wing of a forgotten hospital, a nurse opens a maintenance panel and finds their names carved into the wall. Two names, etched deep into the plaster, names that were never released to the public. Names that only their mother had used. Someone had been there. Someone had remembered. And someone had been trying to speak. The wing was cold, even in the height of summer. Sealed sometime in the late 90s after a series of leaks and structural complaints. The lights flickered every 20 seconds, humming in a way that never felt consistent. Room 2B was listed as inactive, a leftover number on a forgotten clipboard. The nurse hadn't planned to stop. She was tracing a water issue from the East End, checking pressure, replacing caps, marking spots for the next shift to handle. But something about the wall was off. The panel was looser than the rest, not cracked, just tired. It came away easily, too easily. Beneath it, the drywall had split, but only slightly, and carved into the exposed surface, pressed with what looked like a key or a piece of wire, were letters: jagged determined .L Mercer .E Mercer. She didn't recognize the names, but the sight of them made her step back. It wasn't just the names, it was the depth. The way the grooves sank into the wall, like someone had needed them to stay, like they were meant to outlast the dust. She took a photo. Didn't mention it for hours, until someone at the desk asked why she looked pale. The photo made its way up, quietly. A tech assistant recognized the initials, or thought he did. He'd grown up in Mesa, remembered a case his mother used to bring up at dinner. The missing twins, the ones who left practice and never came back. She used to keep their photo on the fridge, said it made her feel like someone still remembered. The file was pulled that night, scanned into the system for the first time in over 15 years. The photos were grainy, the kind that had been copied too many times. Two boys, arms looped around each other's shoulders, both smiling, both squinting. They looked alike, but not in a way that needed explaining. They were twins, same haircut, same slouched posture, same chipped tooth on the left. Their mother used to write their names in marker on their shirt tags just to keep track. Mercer B. Mercer, Luke and Elijah. They had left the school field at 5:52 p.m. that evening. It had been a normal Thursday. Early summer heat, leftover orange slices in plastic bags, coach locking up the cones. They walked the same path every time, down the gravel shoulder, past the chain link fence, across the canal where someone had once painted a smiley face that never washed off. They were supposed to be home by 6. The porch light was already on when they didn't arrive. Their mother waited until 6:30, then she called. The officer who responded logged no signs of struggle, no witnesses. The boys' backpacks were never found, but their cleats were, sitting near the pipe by the ditch, unlaced, placed side by side, not dropped, not forgotten, placed, like they were coming back for them. Search teams mobilized quickly. The town was smaller then. People showed up. They brought dogs, drained the canal, ran grid sweeps through open lots and behind gas stations, helicopters, press, rewards, everything, and still nothing. No scent trail, no shoe print, no thread, no noise. They interviewed the coach, the janitor, students, families. Everyone remembered the boys leaving practice. No one remembered what came next. They had vanished between a whistle and a sunset, Rumors came and went, strangers in vans, tunnels, river stories, cults, coyotes, everything, nothing. Over time, even the questions went quiet. The file was marked cold. The porch lights stayed on for years, burned through bulb after bulb until the mother passed in 1997. The father died before her. Quiet heart attack in his chair. TV still on. Their shared headstone read, "Still searching." No bodies, no closure, no one left to keep calling. The school was rebuilt, the field paved over, the canal rerouted for development. The town grew past it. People forgot, except for the initials, hidden in a wall, carved by a hand that knew exactly what to write. Forensics confirmed the depth and the decay. The carving was old, real, consistent with early 1980s pressure tools. Beneath the letters, partially hidden under a layer of chipped paint, they found a date. June 2nd, 1983. 9 days after the boys had disappeared. Hospital records were pulled from long-term storage. Most of the pediatric files from that era were lost in a flood in 1999, but a few fragments remained. In a logbook, handwritten and water-damaged, one line stood out. 2 minors, male, admitted together, no ID, estimated age 13, quiet, similar features, no photo, no discharge form, no transfer notes, just one faded signature, illegible, and the room number, P. The hallway had been sealed just 3 years later, marked for maintenance. No official repairs were logged, no mold complaints were filed. The wing was simply closed, forgotten, but the names were still there, waiting, scratched into plaster that was never meant to last. Initials only their mother had used, the kind she wrote on lunch bags, on field trip forms, on birthday cards. 2 letters, a last name, a trace of who they were before they were gone. Not everyone had forgotten. Someone had stayed. Long enough to write it down. Long enough to make sure it couldn't be painted over. The wall was removed and placed into evidence, not just the panel, the entire section, drywall cut wide, foam insulation bagged, every edge sealed, photographed, brushed, scanned. Even the dust was cataloged. Nothing else was carved. No other initials, no hidden drawings, just those 2 names and the date below them, cut deep into a structure that hadn't been touched since Clinton's first term. A message that had waited in darkness longer than the nurse who found it had been alive. She was interviewed 3 times, said she almost didn't notice it, said it looked like damage at first, old scratches or wire marks, but then she saw the shape of the M. It had been pressed harder, like the person who made it needed that letter to be clear, that name to be known. It shook her, not in a way she could explain. She hadn't heard of the Mercer case, didn't grow up in Mesa. But the moment she saw the photo someone sent her later of the boys, she said she recognized the expression, not their faces, their eyes. She said it looked like they had been trying to tell someone something, even then, even before. The cold case unit opened their file slowly, like unfolding a paper that had been folded too long. Everything inside was faded, Xeroxes and microfilm, handwritten interview notes, old flyers, a half-used school photo order form with both boys circled in pen. 2 identical smiles. One with a looser collar, one with a stain on his shoulder. On the back, their mother had written, "Lunch day, forgot juice, came home laughing anyway." The case file was mostly procedural. Witness statements, timestamps, map printouts from the original search grid, but nothing explained what was found in that wall. No connection to the hospital, no treatment records, no indication the boys had ever stepped inside until the logbook surfaced. It had been thought destroyed. stored in a cardboard box that had rotted out in a backroom basement after the archives flooded in 1999. But a single ledger had survived, kept in a locked drawer by a former administrator. The drawer had never been inventoried. When opened, it revealed 9 handwritten entries from the spring and summer of 1983. Patient initials were rarely used. Instead, general descriptors. Young male, no speech, placed in 2B, shared room. That line matched the time the carving was dated. June 2nd, the same day the initials were scratched into the wall. The handwriting on the ledger had no name, just a signature looped hard into the paper. It didn't match any known staff file. The address listed on the bottom had been crossed out. No forwarding, no city, no record. Just one more thing that led nowhere. But the admission was there, and 2 days later, another note. Room 2B requested tray for second person. No confirmation of double occupancy on file. The rest of the page had been smeared by moisture. Unreadable. But that line stayed. 2 people, 1 room. No explanation. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it was enough to turn the case. Investigators started tracing what else might have slipped through the cracks. The summer of 1983 had been full of chaos across state facilities. There had been a water line failure at a juvenile center west of Phoenix. Several children had to be relocated. Fast. No time for proper forms. Transfers were signed by hand. Scribbled notes in the margins. No official IDs. Just faces, uniforms, names shouted down hallways and written incorrectly. Dozens were moved, some to county centers, others to hospitals. Some were returned, others were never followed up. The process had holes, and those holes had names inside them. The forensic team checked the wall again. Beneath the plaster near the date was a second layer of carving. Too shallow to notice at first. Only visible after the lighting was changed. The outline of an arrow, pointing down, faint, curved, like it had been made quickly, maybe with a nail. It wasn't finished, just half a shape, but it was deliberate. Someone had tried to point to something, or somewhere, a direction. Below, the floor beneath room 2B was concrete, but beneath that, the old maintenance maps showed something else, a sublevel, not used since the late 70s, designed as an emergency storage space, later sealed, marked as inaccessible after flooding damage in 1980. The access door had been bolted shut, welded over. Paperwork marked the area unsafe, but a maintenance worker who'd been on the original construction crew remembered something different, said the flooding had been minor, cosmetic, said they were told to seal the space for legal reasons, not safety. No inspection was ever performed, just a line and a budget and a set of keys that were never returned. No one knew where those keys were now. No one remembered, except maybe someone did, because 2 days later, a package arrived at the Mesa Police Department. No return address, no postage, just a manila envelope taped shut and slid into the overnight box. Inside was a key. Old brass, labeled 2B down, and a photo, black and white, grainy, a hospital hallway, tile floor, corner of a gurney in the distance. But what stood out wasn't the hallway. It was the shape crouched beside a radiator, half hidden, knees tucked. A boy, staring at the floor. No caption, no date, no source, just the photo. And the key. Someone was opening the past. Key sublevel hadn't been opened in nearly 40 years, not since the welders had sealed the access door shut with thick lines of rusted steel and marked it condemned on a floor plan no one ever filed correctly. It wasn't even connected to the hospital's central blueprints anymore. The entire corridor had been removed from digital maps when the new wing was built in 1998. But the key was real, and it fit the lower lock on the old maintenance hatch just beneath the stairwell in the east wing. The lock cracked open with a sound that didn't echo, just folded in on itself like it had been waiting to breathe. The air that came out wasn't foul, just cold. Cold in a way that felt untouched, like no breath had passed through it in decades. The walls were dry. The stairs narrow. The light from the flashlight moved slowly, caught on particles in the air that never fully settled. The concrete underfoot held no footprints. The dust hadn't been disturbed, not even by rats or mold or spiders, just space, waiting. The corridor stretched 20 feet before it turned left, then right, then opened into a wider room. It had once been a supply vault. Shelves lined both walls, empty crates, brittle cords, rusted shelving units. But it wasn't the equipment that stopped them. It was the door at the far end, smaller than the others. Not labeled, not mapped. It had no handle, only a narrow slit cut horizontally across the center, about eye level for a child, not an adult. And below the slit, etched in small straight letters, the same word repeated 3 times. Silence. 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 They pried the door open with crowbars. The hinges groaned like something waking up after a long sleep. The room behind it was small, maybe 12 by 12. No windows, no fixtures, no furniture. The walls were padded, but uneven, as if the foam had been installed by hand. Patched, glued, shaped to mute not sound, but memory. In the corner of the room sat a box, plastic, child-sized. The lid was half shut, the latch broken. Inside were slips of paper, each one folded twice, and on every single one, a name, not printed, not typed, handwritten, small, sharp handwriting, obedience, patience, whisper, silence, stillness, grace. None of them real names, none of them connected to any known child, just words, given as names, stripped of identity, reassigned. The box was collected as evidence, the papers cataloged, but there was one folded deeper than the rest, tucked into the bottom, yellowed, smudged, worn from folding and unfolding. It had no name, just a sentence. If you remember, you are not alone. The handwriting didn't match the others. It was larger, slanted, hurried. Someone had written it in fear or in warning, or maybe in hope. But the sentence stayed, burned in their minds long after they left. Forensics swept the sub-level. Nothing else was found. No beds, no clothing, no bone fragments. But the silence inside the walls felt like something had once lived there, or stayed there too long. One technician said she felt watched, not from behind, but from the floor, from below, like the past had soaked through the concrete and was still listening, still remembering. When the photo was enhanced, more details became visible. The radiator behind the crouched boy had a number painted in red, 2B-05, which matched the old numbering system for the sub-level before the corridor was closed. The boy's shoes were mismatched, one white, one black. The hem of his shirt had a tag, not from a clothing brand, but a word, stitched in, Cassia, the same name found carved inside the upstairs room at the abandoned facility. The same name repeated in the journal entries. The same name marked beneath a drawing of trees and a bus and a building with no windows. Cassia. She had been there, wherever there was, not just once, but twice, maybe more. The team began cross-referencing adoption records, ward transfers, youth placements between 1983 and 1990, looking for girls between the ages of 10 and 15 assigned the name Cassia. None were found, not officially, but one file stood out. A Jane Doe admitted to a group home in 1986 with no name and no known guardian. Estimated age 13, no record of school enrollment, no prior medical records, no fingerprints on file, emotionally quiet, behavior compliant, physical health stable. She didn't speak for the first 60 days, didn't respond to prompts, but during an evaluation, she was given a piece of paper and asked to write her name. She wrote a single word in the center of the page: light. Nothing more. Her caseworker marked it as metaphorical, poetic dissociation. It was entered into the file and forgotten. She remained in care for 14 months, then was moved. The record ended there. No forwarding address, no adoptive match, no case closure form, just a gap. But the handwriting from her intake matched the slanted scrawl found in the bottom of the plastic box. The same spacing, the same ink pressure. Cassia had been real, and she had remembered. In the following weeks, tips began to surface. Small ones, mostly false. But one came from a nurse's aide who worked at a rehab center in northern Arizona in the late 80s. She remembered a girl who didn't speak, who braided her own hair tightly every morning, who was scared of windows, who drew buses over and over again, buses with no doors, buses on fire. She remembered one drawing in particular, a girl with no mouth, standing in the middle of a hallway lined with mirrors. No face looked back. The drawing had been thrown out, like everything else. The rehab center closed in 1992, bulldozed 2 years later. But the memory stayed with her, not the face, but the quiet. She said the girl's name was Cassia, or at least that's what they told her to call her. The investigation team circled a date on the wall, a red marker line that drew a thread through the map, June 2nd. The carving, the intake, the transfer, the silence, everything kept pointing to that day, the day someone lost their name. And someone else tried to carve it back into the world. The trail didn't end with the girl. It bent, turned, disappeared beneath layers of new records and new names. Each document more faded than the last. Some had been redacted, others retyped, others lost entirely, but the handwriting kept returning. The loops, the curves, the way the letters leaned like they were being pulled forward by something they didn't want to face. Cassia had been moved, maybe more than once. Each time her file got thinner, fewer observations, fewer details, eventually just a sentence or two. Cooperative, quiet, sensitive to sound, allergic to penicillin. Age estimate varies. Her last known placement was listed as a therapeutic wilderness program, the kind that changed names every 5 years. Closed in 1991. Reopened in 1993 under a different foundation. Closed again in 1996. No digital records remained. Just a half-filled intake log kept by a part-time counselor who didn't even remember why she saved it. But she did, in a box in her attic, under tax receipts and family photos. And there it was, 3 lines from April 1989. Cassia, female, approximate age 15, transferred from Mesa Group facility, minimal possessions, carries small notebook, rarely speaks. When asked to draw a self-portrait, she drew a circle and a single word below it. Light. Again. That word, always the same. No origin, no explanation, just a quiet thread stitched through time. The counselor remembered the girl. Not because of her behavior, but because of what happened the day before she left. The girl had asked for tape, just a strip, for a page she said she wanted to protect. No one saw what was on the page. She was gone the next morning, file marked as discharged, but there was no signature, no pickup, no transport sheet, just a note, cleared by directive, and initials no one could trace. That wilderness center had been constructed near a set of abandoned mining cabins, cabins that predated the program, cabins that weren't part of the main trail. The investigator found that detail buried in a planning document filed for forest access. One paragraph listed a set of restricted use structures on the far ridge. The property was still accessible. Barely. The coordinates match an area about 50 miles north of the hospital where the boys' names were first found. The search team was small, quiet, not official, just 3 agents and a field tech. They didn't announce it, didn't notify the press, didn't mark the road. They went in at dawn, reached the ridge by noon, and found them. 3 structures, 1 collapsed, 1 partially buried, and 1 intact. No doors, just an opening covered by a blanket of roots and bramble. The inside smelled like pine and paper and something faintly chemical. The walls had been lined with newspaper, not for warmth, but for memory. Headlines about disappearances, child rescues, missing youth returned after years. Someone had taped them in rows, floor to ceiling. Some were marked, others circled, but in the center of the far wall was something different. A mural, hand-drawn, charcoal and crayon. A girl standing beneath a tree, her arms raised, her face turned toward the sky, and around her, names, not written, scratched, etched into the wood with the same depth and pressure as the wall in room 2. B.L. Mercer, E. Mercer, Cassia, Kimmy, Jonah, Marcy, Grace, Sam, Whisper. Some were real, some were not, but they were all listed the same, all carved with the same desperate permanence. Below the mural was a crate. Inside, journals, small ones, stitched together from scrap, napkins, receipt paper, even the backs of prescription pads, all written in the same hand. Cassia's hand. The writing was uneven, sometimes fractured, sometimes fluid, depending on the day, depending on the memory. Some pages were filled with lists, others with drawings, some with a single sentence, repeated again and again. They said we were chosen. They said we had no names. They said forgetting was holy. In one entry, dated 1987, she wrote about a boy named Jonah, said he remembered too much, said they kept moving him to quieter places, said he used to hum old songs when he thought no one was listening. One day, he was gone. The page ended there, just blank after. In another entry, she drew a map, not to scale, not labeled, just a path from the school field to the canal, then a bus, then a house, then a tunnel, then nothing. The path just stopped. The next page was torn. The journal ended. But taped to the inside back cover was something else. A photograph, cracked at the edges, black and white. A group of children, standing outside what looked like a church basement. Their faces were all turned away, except one. A girl in the back row, her mouth slightly open, her hands at her sides, and her eyes looking straight into the camera. She had written one word on the bottom in marker: me. No one could say where the photo had been taken. No one could say who took it, but the face matched aged and grainy and distorted, but it matched the intake photo from 1986, the one labeled Jane Doe, the one who signed her name as Light. Cassia had tried to tell someone, tried to record what happened, but no one listened, and now the pages were speaking for her. The team took everything, cataloged it, scanned each entry, matched each name. Some were familiar, others had no record, no history, just presence, just fragments of who they had once been before their names were taken. The final page of the final notebook held the last message, written in the same faded ink, smaller than the rest. They tried to make us forget, but forgetting isn't the same as being gone. The notebooks were sent for handwriting analysis. They all matched the loops, the tilt, the pressure, same hand, same voice, years apart. But still, her Cassia had written it all, not to tell a story, but to survive one. Each entry felt like a pulse, weak, but present. A way of holding on to her name when everything else had been taken, her voice when she wasn't allowed to speak, her face when mirrors were covered. She had lived longer than anyone expected, long enough to be moved, relabeled, placed, erased again and again, until she wasn't a person, just a pattern, a shadow that slipped through systems and files and basements no one remembered, until she carved her way back. The photo recovered from the journal was scanned and enhanced, faces still turned away, but one detail stood out: a patch on the sleeve of one boy's shirt, faded lettering, a partial name, K. Leong. The cold case unit pulled the list again: original missing persons from Mesa between 1980 and 1987. There was one match: Kimberly Leong. Disappeared in 1983. Age 10. Last seen walking home from school with her older cousin. Backpack found in a dumpster. No witnesses, no leads. Her name had appeared once in connection with the Mercer twins. A tip called in days after they vanished said the kids had been seen near the same canal, same time, same direction. The tip was never verified, but now the photo made it something else. Not a theory, a trail. The investigators dug back through local hospital logs, school rosters, library cards, anything with handwriting. They found a drawing in the corner of an old class poster, a sun with 12 rays, and one name, Kimmy. The I dotted with a heart, the Y curled twice. The loops matched the journals, not Cassia's, but close. A child's version. Same energy, same pressure. They searched handwriting databases, matched letter shapes against known samples. And then they found it. A card filed by a social worker in Flagstaff in 1992. Name listed as Kim Leone. Age 20. Admitted voluntarily. Symptoms included disassociation, night terrors, difficulty forming linear memory, but no history of violence. The name wasn't flagged. No one made the connection. The file was closed in 1994, marked inactive. The last line on the form read, "Patient remains soft-spoken, but shows signs of recall during quiet. No forwarding address. No records after." But it was her. The handwriting matched the journals, and the signature on the form, one small loop. The Y still curled. The team traced every name carved in the mural. Some had no records. Some were real. One was Jonah, a boy who had appeared in a foster care transfer in 1985, listed under the name John, no last name, no origin, just moved from one home to another, 5 placements in 3 years, each one closer to silence. He disappeared from records in 1990. Aged out, the file said, but the notes suggested something else. Withdrawn, compliant, avoids windows, speaks in third person, refuses to say own name. Instead says, "They gave me Jonah." Not Jonah. They gave me. Like it had been assigned. Not born. A former caseworker was contacted. She remembered him. Remembered the way he hummed. Said he never caused problems. Never asked for anything. But sometimes stared at blank walls like they were windows. And sometimes whispered to corners. Never loud, never disruptive. Just present, like an echo left behind. She kept a drawing he gave her once, had folded it in her wallet for 30 years. A tree split down the middle, one side black, one side light. In the center, a boy with no face. Beneath it, written in pencil. I didn't know where to stand. She never understood what it meant, but she kept it anyway. When she unfolded it again, the signature was there. Small, crooked, a single letter J. But the handwriting matched. Jonah. The team began to see it differently. The carvings, the silence. The missing weren't just lost, they were misplaced, renamed, reformed into shapes that didn't belong to them. And in those moments of quiet, some of them tried to reach back, to carve themselves back into the world, not with volume, but with stillness. They weren't asking to be found. They were asking to be remembered. Another name surfaced, Marcy, carved once in the lower left corner of the mural, cross-referenced with known cases. Marcy Holloway, age 9, went missing the same month as the twins. Different street, different time. But her name had been listed on the same school roster, same grade. She had been in Luke Mercer's class, 3 desks over. They had both checked out the same book from the library that week. The librarian had written their names on the checkout card, still filed, still visible, same week, same title. The disappearance wasn't seen as connected at the time. Marcy's case was handled by different detectives, different assumptions, possibly ran away, family history of relocation, but now her name was scratched into a wall that no one had seen since 1989. Scratch deep. The CIA carved harder than the rest. The mural changed everything. It wasn't just Cassia's story. It was theirs. All of theirs. The quiet ones. The missing ones. The renamed ones. It was a wall of memory carved by someone who never let go, and someone who kept trying to leave the light on, even after the power had been cut, even after the world had moved on. They began to redraw the map, not the official one, not the grid printed in black and blue ink on a whiteboard, but the real one, the one made of lines carved in wood, names scribbled in margins, places never marked on county records, paths drawn by children who were never supposed to return. They started with the mural, counted the names, 11. 4 matched missing persons reports, 2 matched known transfers, 5 had no records, no files, no photos, no proof, but they were carved with the same pressure, the same urgency, the same will to not disappear. The team layered them over timelines, over intake logs, over photos and journal entries. One name kept coming up in strange places. Father Elijah, sometimes mentioned in passing, sometimes circled, sometimes avoided completely. Cassia had written his name only once, near the back of a notebook, small letters, lighter ink, as if she wasn't supposed to say it. They say he sees all the children, even when they hide. That was all she wrote, no other explanation, but the name came up again in a foster report from 1985. Not as a guardian, not as a staff member, just as a visitor, unauthorized. No form, no ID, no photo. But his name was signed, Elijah Moore. It was the only official documentation that existed. The team traced the signature, compared it to financial records, driver's licenses, voter rolls. Nothing matched. The handwriting didn't appear anywhere else. But then they found a sermon, typed, printed, photocopied, handed out at a rural church in 1987. The author listed as Brother Elijah. Inside, passages that spoke of rebirth through discipline, cleansing through silence, memory as a temptation, and identity as a distraction. One line repeated across the back page. The fruit of obedience is invisibility. Someone had underlined it in red. It matched the ink used in Cassia's journals. Same hue, same stroke. The document had been found in the belongings of a woman who had once worked at a youth home near Prescott. She passed in 2004. Her boxes donated to a local archive untouched until now, buried under years of paper and dust. But the words stayed. They always stayed. Investigators searched the property records for anything linked to Elijah Moore. Nothing direct, but one trust appeared again. Sunrise Renewal, a name that had appeared in connection with 2 closed group homes and a failed education program for troubled boys in the late 80s. The trust had no active board members, no listed office, just a mailing address, a post office box in a town that no longer had a functioning post office. But the land remained, a parcel 40 miles from the ridge where Cassia's journals had been found, undeveloped but fenced. The records showed the building was once registered as a nature retreat, but it had no trails, no permit history, no photographs, just a footprint on an old zoning map, a square labeled Block 19. The team moved in slowly, same as before, no cameras, no noise. The gate had no lock, just wire twisted around a post. Inside, the forest had taken most of the land back. Trees cracked through the concrete, vines wrapped around doorframes. Animals had moved in, but the building stood, quiet, narrow, low ceilings, no windows on the back half. The front room was empty, except for a wooden chair and a broken clock. The hallway had 6 rooms, 4 with nothing but dust. The 5th held a mirror nailed to the wall, too high for a child to reach, too low for an adult to use. The glass was shattered, but not missing, still in place, still jagged, as if whoever broke it had been told not to move the pieces. The 6th room was sealed, nails over nails, a sign pinned to the door, correction, handwritten in block letters. The wood split as they pulled it free. The hinges creaked but didn't resist. The room was small, square, empty, except for the floor. It was covered in carvings, not names, not words, just lines, endless, overlapping, circling, some shallow, some deep, some spiraling out from the center like something had been caught there, spinning, trying to get out. There was no furniture, just a single bulb hanging from a wire, dead, no switch, no outlet. The ceiling above it had water stains, and something else, a series of numbers, written faintly in chalk, 73572. Nothing else. The team documented everything, measured the room, scanned the walls, took samples, but nothing explained the marks. Nothing explained the numbers until someone remembered the mural and the photo tucked behind it. It had a tree in the background, 2 windows, and a number painted near the top left corner, 73572. The same sequence, different shape, a zip code, not for this place, but for one near Gallup, an area known for seasonal migration camps and temporary housing permits. The mural wasn't just memory, it was a map. The code was a location. Someone had marked it, circled it, left it behind like a key. The search expanded. New maps, new records, new files. Another trip planned, but the air inside the correction room lingered, heavier than before. One investigator couldn't shake the feeling, said the lines on the floor weren't just patterns. They were something else, something desperate, like a scream that had nowhere else to go. Not loud, not sharp, but endless, quiet, patient, a scream that waited, carved its way through wood and kept breathing. Led to a clearing not marked on any map, just a stretch of dirt between 2 dry riverbeds where no river had flowed in years. The trees were thinner here, the soil light, the kind that shifted underfoot without sound. There were no buildings, no road signs, just earth. But satellite scans picked up something unnatural. Straight lines beneath the surface, too sharp for root systems, too uniform for erosion. They brought ground-penetrating radar and began to map it. What emerged was a shape, rectangular, about 60 feet long, 10 across, a buried structure. The walls collapsed inward, the roof mostly gone, but it had been real. Once, it had been real. The team dug carefully, layer by layer, not for remains, not at first, just for presence, to see if what was left could still speak. The first thing they uncovered was a step, cement, chipped at the corner, painted once in pale green, the kind used in schools and clinics, faded down to dust. Beside the step, a metal bracket, likely once held a handrail. Above it, nothing, just sky. But below, more stairs, 8 in total, leading to a door, half rotted, but still hinged. Beneath the door was a room, and inside that room, there were chairs, small, plastic, cracked by time, 5 of them, facing a wall where something had been mounted but was now missing. Behind the chairs, a crate of old VHS tapes, unmarked, stacked in rows, 27 in total, each one dusty, the labels peeled, some of them unreadable, but a few still bore ink numbers, just numbers. 3.7., 19., 19., 20., 1., 5. The team collected all of them, sealed them in bags, logged them, and then they found the table, bolted to the floor. Nothing on it, just a mark. The kind left by paper left too long under something heavy, a book maybe, or a folder. The indent still visible under angled light, a shadow of something no longer there. The walls were covered in residue, not mold, not rot, not quite paint, something else. A pale film, like chalk dust mixed with age. Someone tested it. High traces of calcium, ash, and something synthetic. Burned plastic, melted tape, and just beneath it, beneath the layers, they found scratches. Not letters, not full words, just the start of something. A loop, a curve, maybe the beginning of a C, maybe nothing. But it was there, and next to it, a name. Kimmy, carved small, low to the ground, like someone had knelt to leave it. The team went silent, not because they knew what it meant, but because they didn't have to. It was enough. Her name was here, not whispered, not lost, carved, like the others. Like a tether to the surface, they searched deeper, found more. A hallway collapsed on one side, wires hanging from the ceiling like veins. Old wiring, cloth-wrapped, brittle, no power, no source. But one of them still sparked when touched, faint, enough to flicker the edge of a camera. They stopped, waited, listened. The sound came softly, not from the wire, not from the room, but from further down, a hum, mechanical, rhythmic, almost electronic, but wrong, like a speaker playing a tone that no longer had a song to hold. They followed it, slowly, deeper into the earth. The structure shifted from concrete to wood, beams supported by old metal pipes. Everything smelled of rust and distance. And then they found it. A door, narrow, curved at the top, made of metal, painted once white, now yellowed like teeth. Above it, stenciled letters, observation. The hum stopped as they approached. The air stilled. Someone reached for the handle. It turned. No resistance. The door opened inward. The room inside was not dark, not lit, but not dark. A single light bulb swung slowly, from nothing, as if it had only just been nudged. No breeze, no shift, just motion. Below it, a room of beds, small, metal frames, 7 in total, lined against the walls, each with a number painted at the head, 1 through 7, each with straps, each with corners stained in ways that couldn't be fully identified. At the far end of the room, a wall of mirrors, too many, some cracked, some bent, not reflecting properly, but all facing inward, all aimed at the beds. Behind the mirrors, a room, a windowless square with chairs and a single television set mounted on a cart. The cord wrapped around its leg someone had been watching. Long ago. Long enough to build something permanent. The floor was scratched. Again. Circles, spirals, names, or maybe just pieces of names. One legible. Cassia. Again. Always her. Like she had refused to vanish. Even here. Even beneath the weight of forgetting. A camera was placed at the center of the room, scanning everything, recording in silence. Later, when the footage was reviewed, they noticed something the eye missed, a flicker in the corner. A shadow that hadn't been there when they... Entered. A shape beside the third bed. Still. Barely formed. But visible in one frame. Not a person. Not a figure. Just the suggestion of presence. Something that had once occupied this space and hadn't yet learned how to leave. They froze the frame, enhanced it, saw the outline of a shoe, a small one, children's size, white, the same kind found beside the pipe in Mesa, where the cleats had been placed, where the canal had gone quiet, where the first trace had been left behind. The cleats, the name, the date, and now this, 40 years later, underground, beneath a building no one remembered, on a road that didn't exist, her name carved again, and a shadow beside a bed. Someone had survived this, and someone had returned. They sealed the room and returned with scanners, dust sensors, luminol, magnetometers, every device they could carry. They cataloged every mark, every fiber. They traced the walls for hidden doors. None. They checked beneath the beds. 2 still had remnants of rope fiber. 1 had a child's sock tucked between the frame and wall, white with a red stripe, size unknown, aged, untraceable. But it was placed, not dropped, still folded, like someone had held it once and let it go quietly. The mirrors were the last to be tested. 1 had been cracked inwards, not by impact, but pressure. Someone had hit it from the wrong side, trying to get out. A fingerprint was found in the corner, partial, small, but clear enough to read 5 ridges. It was cross-referenced with state databases. No match, but it was entered anyway, for later, just in case someone out there still had a name or a reason to look. The tapes found earlier were cleaned and restored. Most were blank, static, snow. Others had signal but no sound. Some had interviews, children sitting in chairs, backs straight, faces forward. No questions audible, no answers either. They didn't speak. They only nodded or stared. The same room appeared in multiple recordings. Walls yellowed, light flickering. Clock always stopped at the same time. 3:07. Each child wore the same shirt, the same number, no names. Tape 19 held the most content, over an hour of footage, spliced. Someone had tried to erase parts, but not completely. The reel showed a boy seated with hands in his lap. He looked 12, maybe 13. Haircut, uneven, knees scabbed, eyes down. A voice off camera asked something, not heard, but the boy responded. 1 word, softly. Cassia. Not his name, not a label, just the word. The only word spoken in any of the tapes. His voice was tired, but calm, like he was repeating something long memorized. And when the video paused, someone saw it in the bottom corner. A shoe, white, red stripe, the same sock, matched, frame by frame. Not proof, not identity, but presence. He had been there. He had spoken her name. And now they were both still echoing through the footage left behind. Another team pulled photos from the vault, crime scenes, intake files, field notes. They organized every trace and found something they hadn't seen before. A folder misfiled in a flood recovery bin, marked emergency relocation, summer 1983. Inside, 2 sheets, the names redacted. But the initials weren't LMEM, the same as the carving, the same as the boys. 2 transfer slips, approved without full identity confirmation, handwritten initials beside each signature. The intake destination was listed as Youth Observation, Extension B. That extension had never appeared on any map. Not in the hospital, not in state programs, not in private trusts. But now they had it in writing. The twins had been moved, not abducted, not stolen in the way the stories had imagined. They had been placed, like inventory, like corrections in a system that forgot to follow up. And someone had signed off. The investigator called the number listed at the bottom. Disconnected. Called again. A different line, routed through a private phone server, traced to a nonprofit dissolved in 2003. No voicemail, no agent, No one. Just silence. But the line had connected. Briefly. Meaning something still listened on the other side. The folder contained one more note. Not typed. Just scribbled in the margin. Handled by M.A. Those initials matched nothing official. No known staff. No assigned psychologist. No officer. But there had been a name. Once. In one of the earliest notes. The journal found near the tree mural. Cassia had mentioned him. Twice. Martin Avery. At the time, the note hadn't been cross-checked, but now the initials matched. Avery had been listed as a transportation officer in 1982, reassigned to temporary youth services in the spring. No address, no termination notice, no obituary, no birth record. But his name came up again, on a land record. Co-signer for a parcel located just outside the Gallup perimeter. Not the one they had excavated. A different one. One still standing. No path. No permit. Just a cabin marked maintenance only. The record was faded. But the signature was there. M.A. The team headed north. No lights. No announcements. They reached the cabin just after 6 p.m. The sun was still above the ridge, the trees long and thin and still. No wind, no sound, just the creak of old wood under tired boots. The front door was unlocked, no electricity. The light from their flashlights caught dust in every corner. The air tasted like cedar and metal and time. There were no personal items, no family photos, no beds. Just 3 rooms. The back one held a single metal cot. And above it, a name, scratched lightly into the paint. Cassia, again, always her. Every place they found, every room they opened, she had left a mark. Not for them, not for anyone, just because she refused to vanish. On the floor beneath the cot, a bracelet, child-sized, cracked plastic, purple, shaped like a spiral, the kind sold in quarter machines. It had a name on it, Kimmy, faded but legible. They bagged it. The 5th artifact linked to her. Sock, carving, journal, mural, bracelet. None of them proof, but all of them presence. They were beginning to believe that was all that mattered. Presence. She had been here, so had Cassia, so had others, all of them carved in silence. All of them learning how to survive without being seen, and even when the rooms were gone, the buildings buried, the power shut off, their names remained, not because they were written loud, but because they were carved deep. The bracelet was analyzed, the plastic brittle, cracked down one side. The name pressed into the surface had faded almost completely, but the letters still held, blocky, slanted, a child's hand or an old machine, not stamped. Burned, pressed, it had been worn. The inner curve was smoothed by skin, by time. Someone had worn it for longer than just a day. It had been part of her. Not jewelry, not fashion, just memory, just anchor. The team cross-referenced the object with toy catalogs from the early 80s. Found a match. A batch sold in bulk to summer camps and church retreats across Arizona. One record showed a shipment delivered to a small independent youth program in 1983. The address no longer existed, replaced by storage units and a car wash. But the shipment was confirmed. The distributor had saved the order list. Not for any reason. Just a file never deleted. The buyer had signed with initials M.A. again, Martin Avery. The trail kept curving back to him. His name a constant thread stitched through closed doors and buried walls. He had never been accused, never suspected, never mentioned in any public report, but here he was, again and again, not loud, not sloppy, just always near the edges, just close enough to hide in plain sight. Another team pulled aerial photos from state archives, old flyover footage from survey planes used to map terrain in the early 90s. One frame captured a shape, barely visible, but consistent with the foundation layout found under the Gallup site. A second frame taken 3 years later showed the same area, but the shape was gone, covered, leveled, grass grown over, as if it had been swallowed back into the earth. except for one thing, a trail, thin, not paved, but pressed into the brush, leading from the area west, into the trees and curving toward another ridge, a section of land marked restricted access, state-owned, environmental study zone, no public entry, no structures listed. The team submitted a request, were denied, appealed, were delayed, appealed again. Eventually, they were granted a window, 2 days, supervised no disturbance allowed, just walk, observe, report. They entered at dawn, fog still clinging to the pines. The air smelled like copper and water and something faintly floral, not flowers, not sweet, just memory, buried deep. They followed the ridge line, marked their steps, documented every tree, every stone, every shift in the ground, and then they saw it. Not a building, not a sign, just wood, pale, dry, nailed into the side of a tree. One board, 3 nails, 1 word, silence, carved into the surface. The S was jagged, the E barely closed, the letters uneven, but deliberate. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a name, it was a rule, one that had followed them since the beginning, one that had been spoken in the journals, in the drawings, in the hollow sound of old tapes and stopped clocks. Silence, not as absence, but as control. They stood for a long time, just stood, and then someone noticed the roots, the way the tree bent, the way the dirt curved slightly downward. They started digging, not deep, just enough to disturb the top layer, enough to find the edge of metal, not rusted, not sealed, just a hatch, flat, square, padlocked, but thin, not reinforced, not made to keep people out, just to keep stories in. They radioed in the location, waited, and then opened it. The ladder went down 20 feet, the walls narrowing with each step. It was cold, colder than the air, colder than anything natural, and quiet. Not just soundless, empty, the kind of quiet that held its own weight. At the bottom was a tunnel, narrow, straight, reinforced with concrete and wire mesh. It ran north, curved once, then ended at a door, the same shape as the others, curved at the top. The paint flaked in layers, yellow, then white, then nothing. Someone reached forward, touched the handle. It turned. The door opened, and the room breathed. Not loudly, not sharply, just air. Old, dry, left behind. The flashlight beam scanned the corners, found shelves, boxes, paper, film reels, binders. One binder sat open on a desk bolted to the floor. The paper inside had curled from heat or time. The ink faded, but the words were there. Observations, child behavior logs, written in clinical tone, but threaded with something colder, something rehearsed. One entry read, Subject 5 exhibits signs of name retention. Correction advised. Below it, another. Subject 9 continues to refer to self as Jonah. Correction not effective. Reassignment pending. And then, Subject 3 attempted to draw unsanctioned symbols. Session ended. Sleep chamber applied that phrase. Sleep chamber hadn't appeared before. No mention of medication. No medical logs. Just that. And then a number. 73572. Again. Same number. Carved in the Gallup site, same as the tree mural, same as the chalk marks above the observation bed. It wasn't a random code. It was a location, a sequence, maybe a room, maybe a plan. The room contained no beds, just shelves and memories, scraps of fabric, old school patches, pencil drawings, names written backward, names repeated. One page had a single phrase written over and over. They told us forgetting was peace, but forgetting is death. And under that, written once, carved not with a pen, but something sharp. Kimmy again. Again. Her name, her voice, her trace. She had been here, or someone had brought what was left of her here. Someone had remembered. Someone had tried to hold her name where it couldn't be taken again. And then the light caught one last thing. A strip of paper, taped to the underside of the desk, folded twice, hidden. On it, the beginning of a sentence. If you find this, but nothing after, no signature, no ending, just those 4 words, like a hand reaching out and never finding the last breath to finish. They left the tunnel in silence. No one spoke on the way up. The ladder creaked beneath their hands. The trees above waited, still, unmoved, like they had been listening the whole time. The hatch was sealed behind them, marked, recorded, logged. But it wasn't the hatch that followed them back. It was the paper, those 4 words. If you find this, nothing else, no punctuation, no plea, just a pause. Like whoever wrote it never got to finish, or chose not to. The team gathered everything, packed every sheet, every label, every looped letter and scratch and signature. They brought it to the field center, spread it across long tables in the cold, white room where names went to be examined, and found a pattern they hadn't seen before. The corrections, the reassignments, the silent rooms and broken clocks, they weren't chaos. They were structure. They were ritual. Someone had believed in all of this, not in hiding, not in hurting, but in reshaping. Children were not lost. They were rewritten, identities replaced with obedience, names carved out and replaced with words, silence, patience, grace. And the ones who resisted were disappeared, not killed, not buried, placed somewhere else, sealed behind memory and metal and time. The field team traced Cassia's name again, found a 6th location, barely marked, just a tag in a maintenance request filed under a construction crew hired to clear brush near the state line in 1990. Someone had spray painted the name on a half-collapsed cabin, not large, not livable, but marked. And in the center of the door, again, the looped C, the slanted A, the double S, her name repeated, not for rescue, not for revenge, but for remembrance. The team sent someone to the site, unofficial, just observation. The cabin no longer stood, just the base, but carved into one beam. The final beam still standing, were 9 names, no last names, just firsts, some real, some coded. Cassia, Kimmy, Jonah, Grace, Marcy, Sam, Silence, Dove, and one they hadn't seen before, Elias. The name hadn't come up in journals, or recordings, or field notes. It hadn't been mentioned, not once, and yet, here it was, carved with the same depth, the same intent. Someone had remembered him, or someone had been him. The name was traced, searched, flagged. One match. A boy admitted to state care in 1983. Age unknown, origin unknown. Listed as found wandering highway 89. No memory, no records. Just a name given by officers on scene. Elias. He was placed in foster care, moved twice, then aged out in 1992. No other data, no photos. But someone in records remembered the name, said the boy was always quiet, watched windows, said he never used his own voice, repeated lines he heard from others. His favorite phrase was, "We're not supposed to say that." Said it often, even when no one asked him anything, even when no one spoke. The caseworker said one thing stayed with her. The night he left a note. Not on paper, not in words, but on her desk. He had taken all the pencils from the cup and snapped them in half, lined them up in a row, tipped to eraser, 7 of them. No explanation, just that. She still didn't know why, but she never forgot it. The number 7 appeared again. In Cassia's journal, a list, not of names, not of rooms, but of drawings. 7 birds, 7 shoes, 7 stars, 7 letters, 7 lights. All under a header that simply read, "Those who wait." The team now believed 7 had survived, not just once, not just barely, but enough to remember. enough to leave messages behind, enough to carve names into walls and trees and underneath desks where no one was supposed to look. They started a new board, a new timeline, 7 core names, mapped against 17 recorded disappearances between 1983 and 1989. Not all connected, not all confirmed, but all vanished the same way. No trace, no noise, no return. Until now. Until this. The cabin, the tunnel, the box, the paper, the photo, the carved letters and broken mirrors, the shadows caught on tape. They were pulling something back, not from death, but from memory. Someone had tried to erase these children, not just their names, but their shape, and someone else had fought to stop it. Cassia had remembered, even when it broke her, even when they moved her, even when she forgot her own voice. Her name appeared in every room, on every door, under every breath, like she had whispered it again and again so she wouldn't lose it. And Kimmy had followed, her name surfacing wherever Cassia had once stood, like an echo left behind by a smaller voice. And Jonah, the boy who hummed to walls, the boy who drew trees, split in two. They had all left pieces of themselves, not for anyone to save them, just so they wouldn't vanish completely. And now, finally, the pieces were being seen, assembled, spoken aloud, not just for justice, but for something quieter, recognition. Not all the names would be found, not all the doors would open, but some already had, and behind them, the air still held shape, still held sound, like a whisper carved into wood that no wind could erase. The board kept growing, strings, pins, printed photos, not red thread, not drama, just quiet evidence laid out piece by piece. Names that didn't connect at first began to lean toward one another, not because of dates, but because of feeling. Drawings that matched drawings, phrases that echoed back decades, eyes and photos that looked like they'd seen the same wall. Investigators started calling them the Echo Children, not officially, just in notes, in hallways. Late at night when the paper trail blurred and the story wouldn't sleep. The case was too old to prosecute, too quiet to headline, but still, it grew. Someone had pulled a name from the archives, not a child, not a victim, a caretaker. Someone listed in early employment files for a state-run residence in 1984. Her name was Adelaide Morrow, night nurse part-time. No credentials, no license, just a line on a shift roster and a signature on a food inventory sheet. But when her name was searched, one detail surfaced in 1992. She was interviewed in connection with an unlicensed shelter on the border, not charged, not detained, just spoken to. And in the notes from that conversation, one line stood out. She mentioned the silence rooms. That term hadn't been used anywhere else, not in journals, not in reports, but it felt known, too specific, too correct. The rooms without sound, the rooms without clocks, the rooms where no one had names. The team traced her last known address, an apartment in New Mexico. She had moved out in 2006, left no forwarding, but the property manager still had her file. She had paid in cash, kept to herself, said she liked quiet. Inside the file was a copy of a letter, never mailed, written on lined paper, not addressed to anyone, not signed, just a list. Cassia, Kimmy, Jonah, Grace, silence, Marcy, Elias. The handwriting was uneven, shaky, old, not the hand of someone trying to explain, just someone trying to remember. And below the names, one line. I tried to say something. I really did. It was enough to reflag her name, reopen records, resubmit fingerprints. Eventually, they found a match not in the justice system, but in a county database from a medical intake form. A woman admitted under emergency circumstances, malnourished, disoriented, no identification, signed in as Jane Doe 24, but fingerprinted, and discharged after 72 hours. Her prints matched Adelaide Morrow. The intake form was dated June 1st, 2005. The notes described her as quiet, withdrawn, but cooperative. She told a nurse she had worked with children once, but they were taken, or maybe hidden, or maybe lost. Her wording had shifted, back and forth, past and present. She spoke as if the children were still alive, or still waiting. She left the facility alone, disappeared again, but her last words were written on the bottom of the form, underlined 3 times. They never let the 7th one speak. The team didn't know what it meant, not fully, but they circled it, highlighted it, added it to the wall, because 7 kept appearing over and over in murals, in carvings, in the snapped pencils on the desk. 7 voices, 6 named, 1 missing. Someone had been erased more fully than the others. Someone had been silenced so deeply that even memory struggled to hold them. But Adelaide had remembered, even if only in pieces, even if only in fear. The search moved inward now, not just into archives, but into memories, into towns that had once housed programs, into families that had once filed missing reports, into people who had almost forgotten they were once close to someone who vanished. A girl named Ivy came forward, said she had once shared a foster home with a girl who didn't speak. Not at first. She remembered her eyes, the way she watched the door more than the window, the way she never used crayons unless they were red. Said her name was Marcy, or maybe that was someone else. It was a long time ago. But she remembered one thing clearly. The girl had written something in the closet. Ivy had seen it when she was cleaning. 7 stick figures, all holding hands, except the last one. The last one had no hands at all, just long arms and empty ends. Ivy didn't tell anyone. Not then. Not until now. Not until the name surfaced on the news again. Not loud, just in a scroll, just enough to remind her. She called it in. They checked the closet. The foster home still stood, barely, turned into a storage shed, abandoned, but the closet was intact, and the drawing was still there, faded, scratched over, but there, the 7th figure, still alone, no hands, no face, just a line for a mouth and eyes too wide. Someone had remembered. Someone had tried to leave a trail. Again. The same story, told without words. The same silence carved into corners, into walls, into skin. The team returned to the tapes, watched them again, this time frame by frame, looking not at the children, but at the background, the scratches, the shadows, the things that moved when no one was meant to. And in one frame, just one. Tape 21, second reel, behind the 3rd chair. They saw it, a reflection in the mirror. Not a face, not full, just an eye, wide, watching, not frightened, not absent, just awake, and beside it, written backward as if scrawled from the other side, a word, Cassia, again, always her, but not carved this time, not scratched, just written, in something dark, something faded, maybe dust, maybe something else. The frame was enhanced. The reflection matched no face seen in the video. Not the child on screen, not the workers, not the known voices. It was someone else, watching from behind the glass. Someone who hadn't spoken. Someone who hadn't been listed. Someone who had waited, still, behind silence, behind the 6th name, behind the rest. They started calling her the 7th, not officially, not in any file or report, but in whispers, in circles of paper and maps, in sleepless shifts and hallway exchanges. The 7th, the one without a name, the one who never spoke, the one drawn without hands, the one reflected behind the mirror. Her presence hovered just outside every confirmed detail, always nearby, always unnamed, like a breath left out of a sentence. The 7th was a gap, A missing sound in a list spoken too many times. The team traced every journal, every carving, every numbered entry, and always stopped at 6. Cassia, Kimmy, Jonah, Marcy, Grace, Elias, and then blank. No 7th name, no symbol. Just a pause. And sometimes a mark, a line, a crack, a burn in the page, as if someone had tried to say her name and couldn't, or wasn't allowed, or had forgotten, not from time, but from design. One investigator noticed something small in Cassia's first notebook, barely legible. A phrase repeated once in the margin beside a list of numbers. Don't forget the one they buried standing up. No context, no location, no explanation. But it was a sentence that stuck, repeated, echoed, like a message buried in rhythm. They didn't know what it meant, not yet, but they circled it, printed it, tacked it above the map. The buried one, the forgotten one, the one who watched from mirrors and scratched her face out of drawings. A technician running thermal scans on old film reels flagged something strange. Tape, 19th, static overlay near the end. Visible only when inverted, but clearly deliberate. A frame with no footage, just black, and in white, written in analog bleed. We never named her. No context, no attribution, not visible on any playback until now. Someone had left it there, a message too quiet to be seen without asking. The 7th had existed, and someone had kept her name from the others, not out of cruelty, but as punishment. The one who had spoken or disobeyed, or remembered something before the others were told to forget. That's what Cassia wrote in her last journal. Another line no one understood before. She saw the room before it was changed. It made no sense at the time, but now it did. A pattern emerged. The oldest children had been reassigned first, the youngest reshaped later. Cassia had been in the middle, Kimmy near the bottom, Jonah somewhere after, but the 7th. She had been before all of them, the one who arrived too early, the one who wasn't erased, but hidden. Someone searched the intake ledgers from the hospital's forgotten wing, dug through water-damaged pages and torn corners, and found a notation. Child admitted under emergency intake. Estimated age 11. No guardian. Arrived unconscious. Nickname only. Subject listed as Sparrow. No date of birth. No medical history. Just a short note. No speech. Draws when stressed. Responds to music. And then one last line. Observed mimicking voice of unseen individual. The file ended there, but the name was circled in red. Sparrow. Not a real name, not given, not chosen, just a placeholder. But it matched a drawing found months earlier in Cassia's mural. A small bird, seated in the hand of a figure without a face. It hadn't meant anything then. Just a piece of art. Now it was something else. A record, a warning, or a prayer. Sparrow had been there. She had arrived before the others and seen what they were not supposed to. She had not forgotten, not fully, but her name had never been written, never spoken, only seen in mirrors and reflections and in the still corners of broken film. They searched for her, not with names, not with birth certificates, but with sound Sparrow had mimicked, echoed, copied what she heard. One agent brought in audio technicians, experts in pattern speech, and matched a sample from one of the silent tapes. A humming sound beneath the static, not part of the room, not part of the voice, too steady, too intentional. The hum had been recorded on multiple reels, same pitch, same length. Someone had been humming behind the mirror, again and again. Same tune, same sequence, and it matched the pattern written in a notebook long believed unreadable. Tape melody. That's what Cassia called it. 4 lines of dots, like sheet music without bars. The same sequence. Sparrow had hummed a code. one that stayed inside the walls, inside the tape, long after her name had been scraped away. They brought the humming to a woman once placed in the same foster system, now 60. She remembered a girl who never spoke, only hummed. Said the girl lived in the same group home for 3 months, 1985. Thin, pale, wore shoes 2 sizes too small, sat in doorways, never walked into rooms all the way, just hovered near edges. Said she used to hum while others slept. Same tune. Over and over, the woman had memorized it. Even now, said she could still hear it when the house got too quiet. The tune was a match. Sparrow had been there, not in name, not in record, but in sound. She had outlived the silence, not with speech, but with memory. They searched for her again, records, drawings, tapes, fingerprints, but there was nothing. No photo, no file, just that hum, a sound carved into tape and bone and breath, and in one room just before leaving. An investigator turned back, looked into the cracked mirror again, and in the corner, just behind the reflection of the door, she saw it, faint, a child's handprint, small, dusted in something dark, pressed flat against the glass, and beneath it, drawn in the fog of age and silence, a single letter, Saint. The handprint was photographed, dusted, measured. Too small to belong to any adult, too defined to be an accident. 5 fingers, narrow palm, left hand, pressed with intention, not in panic, not in fear, just placement. Like a mark left behind not to escape, but to say I was here. The print was sealed, logged, added to the archive beside the tape, the journal, the mural, the carving. It joined the rest, a final breath in a room that had not spoken in decades. And somewhere beneath it all, a pattern finished its shape. The names, the places, the children, the numbers. They weren't evidence of one crime. They were a system, a design so patient and so precise it had nearly vanished under the weight of bureaucracy and flood damage and decades of forgetting. But not entirely. Because pieces remained, because someone had fought the erasure with carvings and colors and rhythms and mirrors. The names of the 7 were never meant to be read. They were meant to be remembered. Over time, the official case went quiet. Statements were made, committees formed, a report was drafted. Most of it was redacted before the public saw it. Liability, chain of custody, historical uncertainty, too many gaps, too many questions. But outside the official version, something else happened. A room was built, not a courtroom, not a memorial, just a place, small, quiet, tucked into a converted library archive. 7 wooden chairs, 1 for each, none labeled, nothing carved, just presence. And on the wall behind them, a single frame. Inside it, a copy of the first carving. The initials, L, Mercer.E, Mercer. The beginning, the point where silence had cracked. The nurse who first found it came to the room once, said nothing, just stood in the doorway, looked at the chairs, and left. That was all, but someone else came too. Months later, a girl, now a woman, her name never given, her photo never shared, but she wore a purple bracelet, faded, cracked, and she hummed softly to herself when she sat down. Just once, just a tune. Simple, quiet. The one found on the tapes, the one that had passed through walls and across states and into a database not built to hold it. The melody of Sparrow. The 7th. She sat in the chair farthest from the door, stayed for 21 minutes, then left. No record, no form, no speech. Just that. After she left, someone noticed a mark beneath the chair, faint, in dust, like a single line drawn with a finger. The letter S. She had come back, not for attention, not for answers, just to sit in the place she was never meant to survive, just to breathe in a room where her name was finally allowed to exist. And maybe that was enough. Not justice, not clarity, just survival. The kind built from fragments and echoes and carvings no one saw in time. The kind that lives on in rooms without names, in songs without lyrics, in children who vanish and still find a way to be found. Some stories never end with truth. Some end with breath. And a hum. And the sound of a name that was never spoken aloud, but never gone.